Hey, everybody. It's episode 64 of the DCC. This week we have two amazing guests from an amazing podcast, Metamashina. We have Nat and Shi. Is that right? Shi. It's Shi, right?
Yeah, Shi. Yeah.
Because when I read it, I read she. I don't know why, but that's...
Well, that is it. That is a problem that has popped up sometimes, but no, it's Shi. It's just a short form of my full name, and it's a nickname I got when I was younger, and people just stuck with it. So
I think it's just from Anakin's mom being Shmi, and I just in my head I think it should be. But...
Well, I hope I don't have the same fate as Anakin's mother.
Yeah, right.
Oh God.
Hey, he committed genocide for her. So, we have the Movie News Weekly. We're going to talk about Captain Marvel, Jon Favreau, the lack of IMAX on Marvel Blu-rays, Antman. We're going to talk about This Is America, Childish Gambino. We're going to talk about some parks news. Jurassic World is going to come and they're going to shut down Jurassic Park. It's pretty interesting. I'll tell you all about it. And there was a big fire at Magic Kingdom, and it was kind of crazy because it's...
Oh, you mean the dragon that was the Common Flames and stuff like that?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's the news, everybody. You already know it, so we won't come... No, it's just a joke. So that's pretty funny. I'm sure everyone was super panicked, and people probably were already trying to sue Disney just for having to witness a fire. So... This is going to be a fun episode. I'm so excited. I've had some other guests before, but they've never been as good as smart as these two. So stick with us on this show. And to all who come to this happy place, welcome to the DCC.
As mentioned, I'm Shi. That's Nat, and we go by Otzi and Ashes Sir Foxes online. The third member of our team can't be here today, but along with Aaron, we run a bi-weekly podcast where we talk about genre fiction from the feminine gaze. And we usually cast a wide net in terms of content, so we'll talk about stuff like Aliens to Mean Girls to Beauty and the Beast, which was our most recent episode.
And recently Land Before Time.
Yeah.
Land Before Time, that was our last recording. It's not aired yet, but that will be our next upcoming episode.
Exclusive. So, we got an exclusive, everybody.
Exclusive, yeah. So that's basically what we do in a nutshell. It's really, really fun. The response to it has been great. We're actually a fairly new podcast. We've only been up since late October of last year. Mm-hmm. So that's what we do.
Yeah. It's phenomenal. Now, I recommend it because like when you have something like a podcast with a feminine gaze, which that's a very big part of your show. I think some men don't want to participate because I don't know why. I don't actually know the thought process behind it, but
we do salt a lot. I think. Yeah, I mean, we're going to be open about the fact that when it comes to our critique of male writing, which unfortunately it's part of our parcel of our podcast, just by the nature of being women experiencing this writing from a viewpoint that is not always, we like to be constructively critical of this of text, but we also are very salty. So
right, and so I think though for the male listeners on the DCC. It's important to check out Metamashina, and it's important because you're going to be a little bit offended sometimes, and you're going to want to say something sometimes, and you should experience that a bit. You should experience what it's like to have something not made for you, and have people talking about you, and I guess your grouping. In a not good light, and to see the mistakes that male writers constantly make with female characters, which we talk a lot about on this show. And it's important. It's important to feel that way. Like, you learn a lot, and there are times where I'm like it's uncomfortable to listen to for me, in the sense of I hate white straight men a lot. They're just they're so stupid, and they've been ruining stuff for so much, and it just makes you frustrated. And and I just want to I want everyone the women on the who listen to DCC, like, be a part of Metamashina, and you'll have people voices that are voicing things that maybe you haven't heard anybody else voice, and that's great to be a part of. And for men, you should be listening to it, not only for a learning lesson, but because it's really entertaining, and you do great deep dives and great analysis, and you really take it to a next level, and you kind of, if you really pay attention, you can see the difference on how between fangirling and fanboying. And Shannon and I, when we've talked about fangirling is actually a state of mind, and Shannon and I can fangirl together, because fangirling isn't limited to being a boy or a girl. It's about how you like something, and fanboying is also how you like something, and you can fanboy and be a butthurt fanboy and still be a woman. So
yeah, true. What
I actually noticed the most, and it actually came when I was listening to the Bell episode, was I think that the biggest distinction between groups of men talking and fanboying and groups of women talking about stuff and fangirling is there is like a sense of authority from the men, and there's a sense of playfulness from the women, and I think that for me is the biggest difference.
Yeah, it's more collaborative. I will say that in terms of the creation of the show and how people have responded to it. So we did create the show specifically for women, to talk about the sort of stuff that we liked in genre fiction. But we've actually gotten responses from men too, and it's been overwhelmingly positive for men so far, which we were actually pretty shocked at. We weren't expecting that. We weren't, to be honest, we weren't expecting to get any guys to listen to the show. we figured it would be a step too far to people. But it's been actually pretty positive, and I would say you're actually really on the nose in terms of the way that women talk about fandom and stuff like that, or how we like to talk about fandom. It's definitely I would describe it as collaborative, because there is not so much definitely a sense of authority, although you do get it from some fans that do that. I would say it's definitely more about bouncing ideas off of each other and seeing how you can interact with the narrative in a transformative way, because women in general tend to have to interact with media properties in a transformative way. Like, there's a lot of properties out there. There's a lot of shows out there that I love that were written by men and had, male directors and stuff like that. But those shows don't actually speak to me. So I have to still interact with it on a different level. I'm probably not making a lot of sense, but no. That's basically the way it works. Yeah.
I was going to say, to add to that, we actually participated heavily within both spheres of fandom. And I think what we found was, in different franchises and such, especially myself, I came from like the Reddit crew way back when, but so you when you see that and you go and transition into a mostly female fandom and realize that essentially there isn't a sense of there's no hierarchy to speak of, and if there is authority, that it's only perceived, and it should only be perceived, because fandom is everyone. It's not just one person speaking down to the group and telling them what canon is and how to interpret it and how it should be. And it's especially true in female fandom because of the fact that, like Shai said, we've had to interact with text transformatively for so long because we haven't been represented, and that's true for many different minority populations. We're not a minority, obviously. We're 50% of the population, but there are much more underrepresented groups that have had to do the same things and have done wonderful works with them. So
I see you guys talking about, say, Monster Husbands, which I kind of want to talk about a bit in the sense of like, why is it always Monster Husbands? And is that like, is the metaphor because like there are like beastly, terrible men out there, but like hopefully there's something nicer inside? And
no, not quite actually. So basically, the way that so if we're talking about women and girls who like to, first of all, I should preface this by saying I can't speak for all women out there. Nat tried to actually make a tweet about this a little while ago, and a whole bunch of women told her, actually, we just monster. Oh, sorry. Actually, we just want to sleep with monsters.
Yes. You could have had sex. It's okay.
So there is that contingent of people that want to just do it there. I would say symbol-wise, if you're talking about like the bad boy type of characters or like the monster husband trope characters.
And the creation of it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so basically the reason why a lot of women like these characters is because the monstrousness is on the outside. Mm-hmm. So we can like when women get into relationships, sometimes that monstrousness is hidden, right? Like you can have a person that looks really good on the outside, looks really respectable, and then when you're in a private setting with them, they turn terrible. So when we see those characters who have that monstrous appearance, or they have those crimes on the outside, you know what you're getting into. And the reason why that is so popular in a fictional setting is because that's a safe space. Right. Like you can actually explore that in a safe space where you can't actually do that in person, or there's no room to mess up in real life. But in fiction, you can actually explore it. You can recognize the signs of particular relationships. And it is tied into the Beauty and the Beast and the Bluebeard myth. And it is, for me personally, again, I can't speak for all women, but for me personally, I like the monster husband trope because you can see what you're getting into. It's better to have those cards on the table. Whereas guys, something's hidden, right? So that's basically the reason why it's so popular.
And I would add that it is also a great source of conflict and resolution, which is the point of narrative storytelling, is a transformation of both characters. And that is already on the tin. It's going to happen in some way, form or fashion, in order for that to be, and that is one of the most satisfying stories that we can have as people in general, not just men and women, because I think a lot of us feel like we are inadequate or have these monstrous qualities within us, and having somebody accept us or, and help us through, or at least, motivate us to change to a better person is part of the ultimate story of humanity. I mean, like that is why it's so attractive and is continuously repeated throughout so much literature. I mean, and I think a lot of it too is from, I think the outside perspective comes a lot from the fact that me and Shire know that a lot about this is that, literature and fiction written for women deals with this almost exclusively in a way that is almost expected. If you pick up any, random romance novel, you're going to have this kind of relationship in some way where there are these qualities and traits that have to be overcome. I mean, that's what makes a good story. Yeah. So, and so we expect it and we love it. And, the monster husband, where you kind of just hyperbolize it out into this actual physical form or this physical action is what is exciting. It's tantalizing. And that's why it's so popular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, too, it's important to take note the fact how little monster wife stories there are.
We need more.
And because what we can boil it down to, which is a bit of a straw man, so it's a lot like, you don't have to all be on board my logical fallacy here, but basically, I'll take an ugly man who treats me nice, where male stories are more like Taming of the Shrew, and it's like, well, if I could get that personality in check, that hot girl would be sweet, so...
I love his take. Well, actually, if you look back in myth and folklore, when you're looking at traditional monster wife stories, it's very similar. You have something like Medea, who is a witch who's taken over to Jason's side. Yeah. Arachne is the same way. Mm-hmm. And then you go into like folklore where you have the animal bride, and so the animal bride is the Selkie, or the or the crane wife, where he takes her feathers and she can no longer fly. But it is a story of subjugation. It's not, and eventually Medea kills Jason's children. There are consequences to taking the wildness of women and trying to stuff it down.
Right, or it's like Species, right? Just to use a '90s movie, right? Like it's like sexy allure to murder dude. Like it's or Teeth. Teeth is a great another
Teeth
story.
Is a great movie.
Movie. But again, it's more like it's again about the folly of man because men suck.
I wouldn't say that.
They do. We love men. We write about that all the time.
No, we all kind of suck a little bit.
I would say both men and women all do suck a little bit. Yeah. I wouldn't say that was actually a big distinction when we started Metamashina. This idea that so one thing that we saw in a lot of critique there's websites out there right now that critique mainstream media that is written by men and stuff like that. And there's this real divide that we saw, or divisiveness that we saw on Reddit and Tumblr between, these two different feminine gaze and masculine gaze. And while we do get salty and while we do have our critiques, we do not want to say that all these things that have been created before us or have been created from a masculine gaze are terrible, because we truly don't believe that.
Of course.
And I feel that it needs to be, we wanted to, not necessarily, because I don't think we bridge the gap properly. I think we're too feminine gaze for that.
And that's not our job. That's emotional labor we're not going to do. What we're trying to elevate the parts of the text that we appreciate, and say, this is a good example. This is great. This is why we love it. We don't want to be continuously just slamming things and trying to find a new hot take for how this is bad, because you can do that all day. Finding the good in things is much, much more rewarding.
Right. Yeah, and it's on us to bridge the gap, really, right? It's us to expose ourselves to, which is weird to say because it's again, 50% of the population, but a new culture, and celebrate it for its differences, and it's okay. That's what we're supposed to get to, right? Tolerance, bare minimum. Celebrating each other's differences, the goal.
Absolute goal of humanity.
Yeah, of humanity. This is not a new idea. So I do think it's important that everyone check out the show, check out your show, and every time, if you're a guy, every time you feel a little offended, good, and think about that, and think about how the reverse exists constantly all the time. So it's good to do, and anyways, you should check out the show, and beyond that you should check out the show because it's just a great show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we move on, I just want to say, please leave a review on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, leave a comment down below. I reply to all of them. And it just really helps the show grow. It helps the community grow. It makes people feel more comfortable to talk about stuff. And that's what we're here, is we want to be a place where if you're in high school or you have friends who tease you or make you feel uncomfortable for liking Disney stuff, you have somewhere to go. Again, when I was a teenager, my dad didn't let me come home with glitter gel in my hair because he thought why he wondered why I hung out with so many girls or why I was in theater or why I liked Disney, and so you hide it, and we don't want you to have to hide that stuff. This is the place that you can go to feel comfortable, and so please leave a review because it helps people find us, and we would really appreciate it, and it's a good way to support the show without having to pay anything. Captain Marvel. If you haven't heard, Captain Marvel's going to be a movie, and there's a bit of kind of a foreshadowing of Captain Marvel in Avengers: Infinity War. How are you guys excited for Captain Marvel? Do you think that she'll have a big role outside of her individual film? It's interesting that they're going back to the 90s to tell it.
I really do. I think it's a good way to go back and bridge the gap. I personally haven't read as many of the comics as I'd like to, but Kelly Sue DeConnick lives here in Portland, and I think she's amazing. And she, sort of revitalized the franchise, and the Carol Corps represent, So I think that they're actually bringing her in as sort of this female lead, a la Wonder Woman, where we can have this really great figure that sort of can be a not a replacement, but as a foil to Captain America, as sort of a leader in the team, because that's always been her role. She's very she's always kind of been that token of hope and guidance for the team.
Yeah, she's kind of like Marvel's version of Superman in a lot of ways, where Captain America kind of is that too. So, but yeah, I
think she's better though, because she's more powerful for one. That's just clear. Yeah, she flies. Yeah, and she has this previous military background as well, being an Air Force pilot. Yep. She's exceptionally she's got a good sense of morality, and she's also just having that whole, she bridges the gap also between the human side of things and the alien side of things because of her Kree enhancements. Basically, I don't know how they will explain it in the MCU, but I'm assuming that they're going to talk about her, that she's been off world for this time out in the galaxy, basically.
Right. Yeah, just doing her own thing and probably solving other, bigger issues. Jon Favreau released some details about the Star Wars television show, that it's actually going to take place after Return of the Jedi, but before
7
the
years.
Battle of Jakku, which is super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
we're excited for it.
Finally, like that's I want to know more
I
about
just
that
heard
timeline.
about I heard more about. I'm excited about it. I'm also, I guess, a little bit apprehensive, but not for the typical reasons. I guess it's more just like because that whole period after the Galactic Concordance and after Return of the Jedi has been really, really heavily explored already in multiple different pieces of media. And I'm kind of wondering what kind of angle that they are going to approach it from and what story that they're going to follow. Because when you have a whole bunch of different stories happening within the same time period, the chances for dropping a plot point or for having a quirk in the canon increases. So I'm reserving final judgment until we get some more details and stuff like that too. I might honestly love the series.
Right.
So,
well, like Luke at this point should be establishing his school. Right, and stuff. So are we gonna get some of that? Like one of the characters gonna be like an Ezra Bridger type, who's like a street rat who wants to become a Jedi.
I think they're going to do more of the Resistance pilot angle of it, as far as my understanding is. And I think what's great is that, they're talking about the animation that they're going to be doing, and you have somebody like Mark Hamill, who is a fabulous voice actor. Like, I've always been of the mind that they would be underutilizing this perfect resource if they don't create this content between these periods with him. And he can also do a mean Han Solo Harrison Ford impression too. So,
I think that time era needs to be explored more, just in more pop content. And I know the EU, because it's been canceled, isn't really there, but you still do have it. But I think this will be fun to explore this time. This is what I want. It's cool to get to see what the Kessel Run's going to be and all that stuff, and I'm excited about Solo. But it's just. I got that time, we know what happens. There's no sense of urgency because you know what has to happen.
That's my huge issue actually with
prequels.
with prequels. Yeah, like it's it has nothing to do with the fact that I might love the characters and stuff, but if I already know the eventual conclusion, it automatically drops the tension for me, and I love tension so much. Like I love not. Nat loves spoilers. I hate spoilers. So I consider this a form of spoilers, right? When you already know that eventual conclusion. So that's why I'm kind of like temperate, I guess. Right.
And they're not handled enough like backstory. So like I like backstory when I watch anime, when when Naruto's about to punch somebody, it's like, okay, we're going to get 12 episodes of this bad guy's backstory before he punches them. And then you're like, I love this bad guy. Like, I hope Naruto doesn't beat him up now. And then he gets beat up. And I like that, but I just don't feel like prequels quite are handled in that manner. They're, they're more like plot backstory as opposed to character backstory, and that kind of bothers me.
Rogue One is a perfect example of this. It's like, I feel like a lot of people just went for that movie just for like the last 5 minutes of it.
Right.
And, you're really feeling emotionally attached to these characters, but when the narrative ends, they're just gone, and then they're not part of the story. Yeah. And so it's very difficult to get emotionally attached to that content for that reason.
Like the most important character is the Death Star plans.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's totally true. Actually, that is completely true. The thing is, in terms of Rogue One, it turned out better than I thought it would. But I only saw that movie like once or twice, and I haven't really thought about it since, because it doesn't have that sort of, it doesn't hold me and keep me like a lot of the other franchises come in. And it's because we already knew everything basically going into it. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. I couldn't agree with you more on that. You guys love Buffy, right?
Nat
Yes.
loves Buffy. I used to watch it when I was much younger, but I have not seen it in a very long time. So my memory on it's a little bit spotty.
I did a rewatch last year, actually. So I just did all of it in it took a long time, but it was worth it.
When you rewatch, do you put Angel in at the same time, or do you just rewatch Buffy?
I have actually not watched Angel, and there's a reason for that. I know the entire storyline, and it didn't really like connect with me. I will give it a shot someday, but at this time, I'm just sort of like, knowing what happens and how it kind of peters out, I didn't really feel like getting emotionally invested in that right now. So, sorry.
No, that's fine. I know it's Cordelia. It just has such a great arc, and you wouldn't have expected it. And same with Wesley, and just like there's just characters from Buffy that they're kind of really not great characters on Buffy. That become like just have such good development, and that just it's a good thing.
Yeah. So
I talked a bit about how because we've got some Raylo shippers, I think, and I talked. So someone pointed out to me. Well, I did a video about how I felt like Kylo Ren needs to be more like Spike than he does Angel, and the reason is because as a character archetype, he is kind of more of an angel, and but to get that redemption and to have the kind of the film conclusion they want and to I think make the most amount of people happy, you kind of need to have that self-redemption before he can have like a proper like accepted relationship with Rey. What's your take on that? I guess
I can comment on this from the narrative angle, like the way that redemption arcs are written, and Nat can definitely cover all the actual Buffy content itself. I will say that in terms of redemption arcs and Raylo as a concept, we should probably separate those two things, because you can have redemption arcs in and of themselves are not dependent upon necessarily a romantic relationship. Like that can actually happen within a redemption arc, but it's not part of a redemption arc.
Totally,
it's just something else that's happening. And I will say that so I actually wrote way back in the day, so 2016, early 2016, I actually wrote a huge essay on redemption arcs and how they function on a structural level, because at the time I actually wasn't huge on Kylo getting a redemption. Like I was really, really neutral on it. I didn't really care. I seriously didn't care one way or another, and actually got me in a lot of trouble for not caring one way or another, because I was like middle of the road. But so Kylo, so I was going to originally do it about Kylo in particular, but then I branched out because I realized that people didn't understand how they worked on a structural level. So I'm like, okay, I'll explain this thing. And so now that we've gotten The Last Jedi and we've gotten all this additional media about Kylo's backstory, and even though we don't have all the pieces, we do have enough pieces now that I have had to change my assumptions about Kylo. Basically say, technically he fits all the check marks for someone who is on the path narratively for redemption. So I can't deny that is a huge possibility of that happening. And in terms of, like, I really broke, I'm going to have to quote myself here because I had to bring my info for this. So basically,
she comes with
the best way to win an argument is when you quote yourself.
That's what, no,
a wise man once said.
Once said, yeah. No, so basically, if you're talking about redemption, like steps for redemption, there is a major part of the character that needs to be met before the redemption arc even starts. And basically, I said, if a villain is slated for redemption, you have to have been a victim yourself at one point or time, you know? So if you are a victim of injustice, even if you visit this injustice upon other people, it's assumed by the narrative and the audiences that the crime on some level was not your fault, right? So like basically you have gotten where you are now due to external factors. And if you have gotten there due to external factors, like there can be a combination of internal factors, but the audience still believes that you can be saved. If you came from a perfect background with no external factors, you're not slated for redemption. You will not get one. So with Kylo in particular, he is essentially, now that we've got more information, we know that he is a victim of circumstance. He's coming from a position of extreme privilege, because he is the prince of multiple lineages, right? But he's basically the novelizations have made it clear that while his family loved him, they weren't prepared to take care of him at the time, and this led to conflicts within his family as well. Snoke was manipulating him from a very, very young age, basically the womb,
Yeah.
And if you're going to get symbolic, basically the darkness that was in him and within Kylo can be seen as a form of depression. And I don't know about you guys, but if I woke up to find my uncle standing over me, contemplating killing me, I would go off the rails. I would go off the rails. So this does not excuse what he has done, because he has absolutely done some terrible, terrible things. But
they have protected him a little bit. Like, I feel so, like, you know, it was kind of funny because someone said that Kylo Ren hadn't committed genocide, and that only Hux and Snoke had, and then I had said, well, if giving the command to wipe somebody out is committing genocide, he told them to kill an entire village of people, so... Right?
I would separate those out, though, to be honest with you. I really want to separate that out, because in terms of the narrative, they actually do show him as being separate completely from that and watching it and experiencing. As a Force user, he's actually experiencing that event, just the same way Obi-Wan Kenobi experienced that genocide that happened on Alderaan way back when. So that
event, but the village in the very beginning of The Force Awakens,
the village is one of his crimes,
Yes,
the village
is one of his
crimes.
Yeah.
So
but
genocide is not one
he doesn't kill willy-nilly like Darth Vader does. That's one thing I like to point out. He always takes his anger out on technology.
Yeah.
So that is the that's the caveat. That's the thing that Kylo has to have if he is even eligible for redemption, and he does. So then when you get into the redemption arc itself, there's basically I think I broke it down into 9 steps essentially. So the first step is the initial crime. So the initial crime is the thing that starts the whole arc rolling. It's basically what drops you down the dark side, right? So Kylo Ren's initial crime is actually not attacking the village. It is attacking the Jedi Academy and killing Luke's Padawans. Even though it was prompted by Luke's actions, it doesn't change the fact that he killed some kids. Right. So that is basically, in terms of narrative-wise, that's the ultimate sin, the killing of children.
But he was also not alone in that, right? He took some of Luke's students with him, and it's not implied that there was a complete slaughter. It's implied that there was some kind of battle, there was some kind of bigger event that happened around that. We just don't have the details yet, so we can't draw conclusions from it.
Yeah, but I would still say that
it's still bad. Yeah, don't worry.
So, I'm not trying to after you have the initial crime, you have a worsening of the crimes. So after the crime is committed, you need to have a series of repeated really bad behaviors, instead of a one-time event. If a one-time events, narrative-wise, are basically structurally that basically says this was an accident. It's not the same as a redemption arc. You have to double down on the stuff that you're doing. So for me, in my opinion, I think the whole Force Awakens was a worsening of the crimes. So he attacks the village. He kills all the villagers. He kills Lor San Tekka. He tortures Poe. He bombs Takodana, which is actually a big thing, you know. He kidnaps Rey. He kills Han. He attacks Finn. Like, he does a lot of things, right?
Tries to torture Rey.
Yeah, well, I disagree with that strongly, actually.
I don't like that, yeah.
Yeah, I would disagree with that strongly, because if we're going to go down that route, then basically the mind probe of all Jedi is the exact same thing. And we cannot hold the standards of a female character to the same standard. If we're not holding this male characters to the same standard as a female character in the same position, you know,
that's very troubling, actually, because it means that we're treating women as we're assuming victimhood.
We're assuming victims and perpetual victimhood, and as a woman, I'm really not okay with that. But then you go into after that, you have a reckoning. So after you have the worsening of the crimes, you have to the character has to have to come to a revelation about them. And I would say that the entirety of The Last Jedi is a reckoning for Kylo. So he has to come to terms with the fact that he's working for the First Order, and he is so like the movie makes it clear he doesn't totally believe in them, but he's still doing their dirty work, right? He has to come to terms with the fact that Snoke is not there to help him, that he's all alone in large part due to his own choices. Like, this is his decision that have led him here, even though he was a victim of circumstance. This is his fault for being here in this particular moment. And the true moment of reckoning is that scene in the throne room where basically he tries to propose leadership with Rey, right? And she rejects him, you know, and basically she says, by that rejection, she's saying it's a clear refusal of his ideology and his continued adherence to it. And until he makes amends for that, he's going to be alone. And then after that, you have a refusal of the reckoning. This is in redemption arcs. And That basically is the denying of responsibility of guilt by the villain. So I would say Kylo's refusal of the reckoning is his response to Rey, right? So he bombs the Resistance, loses it on Crate. He doubles down on what he's essentially done. He's denying his own culpability and blaming others, and that happens in redemption arcs. And then you have a few more steps after that have not happened yet. So if the antagonist denies that reckoning, if they deny their own guilt, the next thing that's on the list is suffering. So you have to suffer for that lack of acknowledgement for your guilt, and this is for the audience's satisfaction, and it's punishment for what you've done wrong, right? It can be psychological as well, but you do get punished for that suffering. And after that suffering comes an acceptance of guilt, not from an outside source, but internally. So Kylo has to accept his own guilt, right? He has to basically say, okay, this is my fault, and it has to come. And, the acceptance is supposed to come about naturally, but the subtext is through punishment. The antagonist is forced to see the error of their ways. However, they're still not redeemed. If they accept, if there's an acceptance, they need to, more suffering is involved, because instead of suffering in order to see the error of their ways, they're suffering to build up sympathy with the audience. Because basically, human nature for all of us, if you say sorry for something, you want to be forgiven pretty quickly, right? You feel like you want to be forgiven. And that's a very human response. But if you see someone who has basically said, okay, I'm sorry for what I've done, but they keep on suffering, you're like, well, why did they keep on suffering? They've already accepted their guilt. So that's part of the redemption arc. And at the end of this suffering comes a selfless sacrifice. So they need to make a huge sacrifice in order to win over the audience, to show that they are willing to lay down their lives essentially and willing to make amends. Right. And if they do that, then there's forgiveness. And the forgiveness comes from the victim to the aggressor, and the subtext is that's been earned. And then one of two things happens. Either the reformed antagonist gets a new life or a second chance, if there was ample amount of suffering involved, or death, or if there was not enough suffering involved, then they die. So basically, the suffering has to be proportional in relation to their crime. If it's not proportional, if their crimes are too large, your chances of getting out of redemption arc alive are super slim. And the other thing about redemption arcs that I should point out is that they are only chronological if you're telling a linear story. If you're telling a non-linear story, these events, they still happen in order, but the way in which you depict them can shift, and the pacing on them varies too. Like, for example, technically Vader got a redemption arc, but it was within the last movie. Most of it, right? Books tend to be more spread out, but that's how redemption arcs work, as an overall arcing thing there too.
One thing about Vader's redemption is that I had always felt that the prequels kind of undid his redemption, because the story, when we learn about the story of Darth Vader in A New Hope, it's that he attacked he killed the Jedi and he hunted down the Jedi and stuff like that, and he was a good pilot, and that was his crimes, and of course he helped the Empire, and that was it. He helped the Empire rise, and he hunted down Jedi and killed them, and then when he gets redeemed, it was like, okay, well, he wasn't part of the Death Star, that was Tarkin and stuff like that. So but hunting down Jedi, at least he was killing equals, and I felt like the prequels with the Sand People, and then with the younglings.
Yeah, and it's brutal, and I recommend anybody interested in kind of getting into the prequels deeper, reading the Revenge of the Sith novelization by Matthew Stover, because it really gets into the internality of that character and how he was vulnerable to those outside forces. And again, in the redemption arc narrative, those outside forces influencing you do have an effect on whether the audience is willing to accept your forgiveness. Right. In the case of Anakin's crimes were absolutely so vast and innumerable that he would be unable to survive that redemption arc. I mean, that's it had to be, At the same token, like when you look at his story and what happened to him over his entire life, he was set up to fail from the very beginning. And so what they're establishing is that the Skywalker, born of the Force, chosen one thing is a curse. It's a curse. Like it's not something that it's not a gift or a boon that's good for you. It's something that you have to be able to master, like power over, because you are always going to be subject to the strongest parts of the Force, both dark and light. And
right.
So,
and it wasn't his fault that the Jedi didn't really see the fact that the imbalance was on the light side.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, balance to the Force, guys. That's going to be great. It's like, aren't there like 1,000 good guys and 2 bad guys? Anyone think that the balance is going to go the other way? Anyone? No? Okay.
Yeah. And
just Kit Fisto? Just Kit Fisto is raising his hand like, hey, guys.
I don't know. So yeah, and you could argue that Mace Windu was riding the balance between the two, and and there's a lot of nuance there, which is really fun to explore, and they're doing it now. But in terms of like the major crime the Jedi committed it's taking children from their parents,
taking children from their parents,
and not acknowledging that part of the developmental growth of people in general is having a relationship where you feel loved and accepted by your family, and also encouraging people to grow up to provide the same to not only their romantic partners but also their children.
Well, Yoda's whole point was that he's like young Anakin was too old because he was already too attached to his mom.
Yeah.
And this is how I see the entire saga now in nine movies as it's being played out, is this fundamental story about what happens when you are delayed developmentally and you don't learn how to become the adult because your parents were absent or weren't able to provide for you. And in Anakin's case, it was the Jedi that became his surrogate parents, and then Sheev when he kind of like came in and started manipulating him. And Obi was trying to do this, but Obi was also very young, so he was a brother to him more than an actual, father figure or master. Qui-Gon would have been that, would have been alive. So, you have this story that is perpetuated into the sequel trilogy where, Ben is let down by his parents. They weren't bad parents. They had very busy lives, and they had him just after the fall of the Empire, and there was so much to do. Right. And Leia could not leave her responsibilities. Han had his own thing, and then Luke got the Force when he was 19 years old. He did not grow up with it. He did not deal with the nuances of growing up with this magical ability and then also having all of these outside influences, like these external influences that are very clearly coded into the text now that we have the novelizations, like, nightmares and darkness and all this kind of stuff. Like,
and it made him better. It like made him. That's why he's, arguably, at that time before Kylo was the strongest, and that's why he's able to balance light and dark, because he's not this, like, he wasn't brainwashed and raised to just like believe one, like he knows the follies of man and how to be like a normal person, like, but to still do the good thing, and that's why he uses Force chokes and things like that.
At least Luke going dark in Return of the Jedi, where he's wearing black and force choking Gamorreans or whatever, is the perfect example of him, finding his inner darkness and having it balance him out. But the whole point of The Last Jedi that I really love, and I wrote an essay on this, is that Luke has denied the darkness. He has denied the dark side as being any kind of form of anything. Like, he's been so terrified of it by, the influence of Obi-Wan and Yoda's, and also seeing where his father went with it. I mean, that would traumatize me for life. If I saw my dad, the dark side took him over and turned him into just this horrifying nightmare creature that tormented the galaxy for years, I'd be afraid of it too. Yeah. So he doesn't have that capacity to understand that part of the acceptance of the Force as a whole is knowing that the dark side is there and that it is not evil. The evil connotations come from our Western modes of thinking about how, black and white, good and bad, God and devil. The Force mythology and cosmology is not based on that. It is based on much more Eastern and ancient Western theologies, where you have something more like the light cannot exist without the darkness, and it is not evil. It is just one part of creation. So
right. Yeah, no, you're right. We didn't really quite talk about it, so like we were missing the Buffy. So basically, the argument is that Buffy kind of tries to save Angel, and as opposed to Spike goes out on his own and saves himself for love. And the point is that Kylo, because redemption is separate from the love angle, he needs to go on his own, save himself somehow, whether that is like kind of changing what the First Order does and maybe not killing, like, maybe like he's letting the First Order crumble. Like, we don't know how he's going to lead the First Order. So, yeah, go ahead.
This is going to go into speculation territory, which is I don't know, me and Shai are very into it.
We do lots of theories on the channel.
Yeah, I think a lot of the way that people view The Last Jedi in terms of the way that Kylo could have reacted in that movie are very flawed, because I think that the idea that he could have gone to the Resistance and done anything, or even, when Rey asks him to stop the bombing of the Resistance, he is not in a position of power there that is earned. He's in a position of power where he's filling a vacuum left by Snoke. Right. Nobody trusts him. Nobody likes him. He force chokes Hux all the time just to get him to do his orders for him. Right. And, he's not a natural element within this organization. But I think the point is that he, from the beginning, has been infiltrating this organization as an outsider. They've been suppressing the fact that he's Leia Organa's son, which who knows how many people know that, because, in the nice little visual guide, they say, like, Snoke does not allow anybody to say his real name. And, he kills Lor Santeca before he can kind of out him in that sense, right? He's teasing him with the fact that his family is... he knows his family. So there's this whole element here that we really can explore in 9 that I think is going to be much more interesting than people think. He will be a horrible leader for the First Order because, again, nobody really wants him there. He just kind of is the most powerful Force user in the galaxy. Right. But at the same token, he can actually change the organization from the inside and do good and possibly be a benevolent leader, and possibly maybe he does have his mom's politics. Maybe he does have his grandma's politics. We don't know. We haven't had that lens into what he's really trying to accomplish by going up this ladder of power. And we don't even know if that was his end goal. Like, was that something that he was planning on doing from the beginning and Rey helped catalyze it?
That's like, I brought that up a little while ago, and I can't remember. Someone kind of shut me down on it, and but I don't really remember.
He didn't plan on killing Snoke until that moment.
And that's why he was able to do it, because if he had planned it before, he wouldn't have gotten away with it.
Somebody was in his head seeing everything that he thought, so like, how could he not?
It's, and I kind of feel that way too. Like, there's no reason, we don't know what type of leader that Snoke is going to be. So
Kylo.
Oh, sorry.
We know what Snoke's like.
Jude's distracting me again.
Specifically, you were asking about Spike versus Kylo and Angel and stuff like that. Yeah. While I have not watched the series in a while, I will say that I remember that I disliked the relationship between Angel and Buffy, because for me personally, and I had a hard time articulating this when I first watched it because I was much younger. Yeah. But I would say that I felt like it wasn't earned. Because he's cursed with the soul, right?
He's cursed with it, yeah.
And it actually
as soon as it's gone, he's evil right away.
Exactly,
there's no part of him.
So I actually, while I do hesitate to compare this much darker adult series to a series that is partially aimed at children. That said, I do think that it is definitely has to go the Spike route, right? Because in terms of you're talking about redemption arcs and redemption narratives, right. And that's a huge reason why I didn't like Angel and Buffy's relationship, because it didn't feel earned, and that's for me personally. I can't speak for everyone, but for me, it has to be earned,
and he earns it separate.
Yeah, Angel wasn't my favorite. I do think that Spike's narrative was more fulfilling, it is. There was actually something you mentioned in your video where you talk about where Angel becomes evil again, right? Where you where I wanted to bring it up, where you basically said he becomes evil after they have consensual sex.
Can I just add to that, like the backstory for Angelus, which is Angel before he became good. When he met Buffy, he was struggling with his,
right.
this humanity. He was really awful. He was the worst. He was like the terror and scourge of vampire kind, and he loved torture. He had never experienced love because
mind manipulation too.
Yes,
and, he loved breaking down. I wanted to say Darla, but yeah, that's right. Yeah. He wanted to break her down and just really take her apart and make him hers and as a possession. Like it's bad stuff.
So he starts out in darkness, goes up to the light, and then through the curse that he's afflicted with, eventually goes back to that darkness. And what happens is that it's such a traumatizing event for Buffy that it basically, she is haunted by that for the rest of the show. And
with all her relationships with men and how guarded she is, she starts. I would say that. She uses a couple men like objects as well. There's that episode. I would say I can't remember his name right now. He's like the army boyfriend.
Riley.
I feel like, Riley, he's so great, but she just she was never that into him.
There was a power imbalance there. Right. And the whole point of Buffy's character is that she's so powerful as a slayer that no mortal man could ever really stay, you'd have a lot of resentment, I think, for that. Unfortunately, sadly, men, you can have a strong, powerful slayer woman and still be a mortal man. But to that token, so she's vulnerable. She feels like if she emotionally opens up to people, she loses them, which is normal for somebody that's been traumatized through all her experiences. And going back to that with Angelus, it's just like, when that change happens, she's an emotionally vulnerable moment. He becomes evil and he totally messes with her, to the point where she can't look at him the same way again. And it's really sad because I was a huge Buffy Angel shipper, when I was in junior high when the show was coming out. And I remember the episode where she kills him and he gets his soul back for just that flesh, and then they play like Sarah McLachlan, and I'm like sobbing my eyes out, calling my friend on the phone,
and then he was like in hell for like 900 years.
Yes, exactly.
So like, isn't that like enough, Buffy? Like, isn't that enough?
Was it enough? No,
it's not enough.
But the point you brought up, the point you brought up in your video specifically, actually, where he turns evil the moment they have consensual sex. I don't actually. Yeah, this was something once again, that was something that I actually had to think about, because it was not something that I picked up on when I'm younger than Nat. I was like, I think elementary school when it still came out. I was young and watching it in elementary school. I would say that I don't like this idea of a man turning evil the minute he experiences consensual sex, because it basically implies, subtext-wise, that feeling empathy for this woman and the consensual nature of that relationship is the root of all evil, and literal evil with Angel, right? And it's actually pretty regressive in terms of it's a really regressive trope, and that I think that needs to be avoided.
Yeah, that's kind of why it brings a chuckle when you say it, because the idea is that like sex was true moment of happiness, which is like another euphemism for climaxing, and so it's like, it's so awkward because you're like, so like sex made him bad, like is like sex bad, like is that the message? Like,
it's also a deep-seated fear of women. Right. It's not deep-seated. It's actually apparent in every time we're going out into the world trying to meet partners. It's like, when you're younger, is it giving in, right?
Yeah, I know. The whole culture of telling women to withhold and telling men to pursue is so silly, and I think that's where a lot of our problems come from. We should just encourage everyone to just be comfortable, as opposed to
I totally agree.
withhold
agree.
and the but I think actually it is progressive in its storytelling, in the sense of the metaphor there is there are men out there who do change after they get what they want. And that's kind of, because it's monsters, that's kind of what I think that's where Joss Whedon was probably trying to go with it.
was definitely what he was going for.
Right.
Yeah. And the way that I love Joss Whedon, but I'm also extremely critical of his way of dealing with female characters in the sense that he definitely has this tendency to torture them in the most extreme ways in order to try and get, it's basically, you can't like have like a normal like experience. It has to be like, you have to be beaten up and, destroyed over and over again in order to become, I don't know, more powerful.
Well, because he always writes about superwomen, right? Like, which is great, but like they always have to be beaten up.
Yeah, and he has these tropes that he reuses over and over again, and it's not something that I hate, obviously, because I've watched all of his shows. I mean, I'm a Dollhouse apologist here. Like we don't,
Dollhouse. Oh, I love Dollhouse.
Yeah. I love it so much.
Dollhouse.
Talk about a villain redemption arc that didn't happen that I wanted. Okay.
So a little bit of a weird thing. So with Marvel movies, they use a lot of IMAX, and Avengers Infinity War in particular was almost completely shot on IMAX. Yet when they come to Blu-ray, it gets edited and taken out. But we've seen in like the Dark Knight and the Dark Knight Rises and that trilogy, that you can actually just have it go from the different aspect ratios and people aren't bothered by it. That's all I really wanted to say. Like, Disney, give me my proper aspect ratios. That's all. I just want my proper aspect ratios.
I've never have a problem with it, unfortunately. Yeah. I mean, I love Letterboxd, but just...
I now have a much larger screen, so actually I do want my proper aspect ratio now. Yeah. Before, when I was just working on like a tiny little laptop, I didn't care too much. But
and it impacts the filmmaking. Like it does. Like you're getting close-ups when they're not supposed to be close-ups and stuff like that, and that just kind of bothers me. And I worked at a video store back in the day when we were trying to convince people to stop watching full screen and go to widescreen. So
yes, widescreen.
It runs deep. It runs deep. The pain is real. Ant-Man seems like it's going to be its own story, but then also establish how they can save the universe from Thanos. It kind of seems like the whole multiverse. I told Jude to be quiet, and so he thought playing with a balloon right beside me was. This is an all Jude episode. Yeah, I love it. Why don't you just come say hi? Just come say hi. You can come say hi. You can be on the episode. And then you can go hide somewhere. This is Jude.
Hi, Jude.
You can say hi.
Hi.
All right. Can you go play with your noisemaker balloon in your room now that the spider's gone? Or if you want to be quiet, you can stay here. Cool.
I love him.
Those glasses are fake, by the way. He's a poser.
Oh, shoot.
So... so it looks like it's going to establish the kind of a multiverse, and Ant-Man's going to be protected by the Wish because he was in the tiny verse, I guess they call it, or whatever.
Cool.
Yeah. So, and also there's other again, there's just as much as there's like Dormammu out in outer space. There's bad guys down in the quantum time as well. So it looks like we're going to explore that a bit.
Janet Van Dyne is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we were all in agreement that she's still alive in the Tinyverse,
well,
right?
It seems like some rumors are that it's going to, because it's a quantum verse, that they're going to be able to go through time, and that's why we're seeing some of the older costumes popping up, and there's a device on some of the people's hands that looks like they might be able to go with him and kind of figure some stuff out. Also, on our channel, Angie came up with a theory that Gamora is alive in the Soul Stone.
This has been confirmed, actually.
Yeah, right. And also that Vision isn't dead. That Shuri.
She has a copy of him in Wakanda.
But that she even just finished. She finished. And so when it got taken out, he just turned into his like white, he's just like his version without the Soul Stone.
Yeah.
And that Doctor Strange is in the Time Stone. And also, so that those three actually could be helpful as well. So there's some little information that's kind of come out because of Ant-Man coming out. So I just thought that was kind of cool to share.
Love it.
Let's do it this week on YouTube. So this week on YouTube, I think the biggest thing on YouTube, 100%, has to be "This Is America" by Childish Gambino. Boy, oh boy, that video. If you've only listened to the audio, you need to really watch the video because the song itself is kind of almost nonsensical. But that's the point of it. and you really need the video to put context into it. Now, have you watched This Is America?
Yes.
Repeatedly.
Yeah, repeatedly.
Repeatedly.
And I'm a huge Childish Gambino fan. Usually behind me I have a Childish Gambino record, but I've been doing the Awesome mixtape lately. What did you guys think about the video when you saw it?
So before I say anything else, I should preface this by saying that because this is an explicitly political video about the Black experience in America, especially when it comes to gun violence.
Right.
It's not my lane to comment on the political aspects of it because it's not my experience at all.
And we're Canadian.
I will say, yeah, I'm a Canadian, right? It's a very different experience. I will say though, outside of that, I love it. I really, really love it. I love the symbolism in it. It is so beyond, like the symbol. There's references to Jim Crow at one point.
Yeah, that was
death on the white horse.
The Jim Crow,
death on the white horse.
The stance
I was
really
just
cool.
blown away.
Beautiful.
It was just.
Yeah.
I love. It's a fantastic video.
His whole dancing.
Yeah, his whole dance too, and I love how it tackles the blunt, brutal way it tackles like gun violence. Like it really
and distraction.
It makes this. It makes a statement with it. So yeah, in general, I have nothing but praise for it. You know, I really, really like it. And I wasn't. I kind of clicked on the video by accident. I wasn't expecting to see what I saw, right? Because it was just on the Twitter feed and everyone was talking about it. And I'm like, well, we'll just click this, right? And then I got obsessed and I was watching it on repeat for like 2 days. Yeah. So
even the point to where he's wearing you could argue he's wearing Confederate Army pants and
yeah, I saw that. Yeah,
and yeah, just the care in which the guns are taken away and how no really recognition is given to the lives that are lost. And the fact that the dancers in them are so distracting and the song is not singing about the stuff that's happening around them. There's only one time I would say that the song references the video, which is This Is a Celly, It's a Tool.
Yeah, which is a reference to the fact that people were shot holding on to those items because police officers mistook them for guns, and they have the reference to the Charleston Nine, who were in the choir being shot up, and like you said, the care of the guns and the complete neglect of the bodies that kill them is definitely a powerful commentary on what we're experiencing here in America, and it's like every single day, whether it's a shooting or somebody calling the cops on somebody just for the fact that they're Black, we live in a really messed up society, and this is very present. I hope it it was needed. I think we continue to need more of this visibility to the problems that we're experiencing.
No, it sucks. It sucks that we have to continue. And being in Canada, we're removed from it, and like we kind of like just all stand around, just like shaking our heads, like in confusion. And we're like, there's solutions to these problems, and they're very readily available that every single country does not have. And so it's hard because Americans are our friends, and they're our brothers and our sisters. And it's hard to like kind of stand by on the outsides watching this like tragedy after tragedy.
Yeah, we are a perpetual train wreck down here. Sorry. Well, and I think the way to look at it is to recognize that the visibility of Black voices having these concerns is one of the biggest priorities we should have within our media, because of the fact that it's been a long time since Ferguson. We still have to push Black Lives Matter. We still have to push the idea that, our racism is systemic and it is part of our system, and we need to address the root core problems,
like redlining real estate and stuff and all that stuff. Like it's all part of it. Like it's in the infrastructure. New York being the most segregated school systems in America is a problem.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's frustrating. So let's talk about some parks news. This is more on my side, but we are a Disney, Marvel, Star Wars podcast, and we talk about the parks and we talk about all this stuff because it's fun. It's fun to talk about this stuff. It's fun to experience the magic of going to a park. In the Magic Kingdom, though, they experience some real magic when a dragon caught itself on fire. Poor Maleficent. She'll never be the same. It's just crazy news. The dragon caught fire. I don't know. It just blows my mind. Did you see the images of it?
I saw it. I watched the video, and then I saw the dragon afterwards. It looks so droopy and sad.
It's it's
the saddest looking. It's the saddest looking dragon ever. But when it was actually on fire, it actually looked pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like it looked like it was breathing.
Metal.
When I first saw it, I was like, "Yeah, way to go, Disney!" And I'm like, "Oh wait." It's pretty funny. And then Jurassic World is coming to Universal in Hollywood, which is really cool because the Jurassic Park ride is great, but it is a little dated. The animatronics are getting a little bit old. And Jurassic World is a way to have the visitor center kind of be updated and maybe a little more tech savvy, kind of like the visitor center in the first Jurassic World. And you get to have the new dinosaurs like the Adontosaurus Rex and the big sea one. I can't remember what the water one is, but I think that one's going to be in it as well. So that's kind of fun. It's a little new addition. There's going to be more ways to have. Have you ever been to the Hollywood studio, like the Universal Studios in Hollywood? It's weird. All the attractions like to squirt you with water. Like it's really bizarre.
The Jaws one.
Yeah, like the Transformers ride will just you're like, what the? Why did I get sprayed with water? Like, what the heck? Like it's super weird. Even at the end of the Jurassic Park ride, you go through the big splash, and then just like a Dilophosaurus is like, psh, and you're like, what? I'm already wet. I'm soaking wet. It's just like. I think the Mummy ride does it. I think it's like every single ride just like spurts you with a little bit of water.
Yeah, all my memories of going to the parks, California Adventure and also Universal, is just being wet most of the time.
Right. They must have done a survey, and people just like love being wet in the hot weather.
Not after dark. Though.
Yeah.
It's really cold. Right. It's a marketing scheme. They want to be able to sell you a sweater.
Ooh, yeah, you got to buy a new shirt. Yeah, that's right. So it's super cool. I'm really excited about that. Hopefully, Josh will be able to go to Universal before it closes to have like a last hurrah on the Jurassic Park ride, and then hopefully I'll be able to go on the Jurassic World ride because I love going to the parks a lot. and I want to do a follow-up video. I did a Slytherin in real life video where I wear my Slytherin robes and I walked around being a jerk to people the whole time. It was pretty funny. And I had the cast members there participated, and some of them were in the know, some of them weren't in the know, and it was really great.
Awesome.
And then these tourists, like, I guess they thought I was somebody, and like they like took photos with me and stuff. It's really funny. It was really great.
Awesome.
It was a great time. That's an old video. That's about over a year ago now. So yeah, check that old video out.
Definitely.
All right. Well, this has been episode 64 of the DCC. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. We talked some heavy stuff. That was some intense stuff. I didn't know if we were like going to be friends partway through, or I didn't know, but it was no. Okay.
We're always friendly.
Yeah. Thank you so much. What's the best way for people to connect with you?
For me, it is, you can find me on Twitter at @Otze_O, and that's spelled OHTZE_O. And you can find me blogging at otze.com. It's spelled the same way.
Yeah, and I'm Nat. I'm at Ashes for Foxes on Twitter. That's the best place. You can @ me if you want. Mm-hmm. I would also recommend going to our following us on @Metamashina, METAMASHINA. That's our podcast, and we have a blog, metamashina.com, as well. So please come over, listen to our podcast, maybe get offended, maybe write a review. We would love to hear from you. We also take recommendations for content that we cover, especially if it elevates the feminine gaze, and also if or if it doesn't, and you want us to be really scorching on it. So yeah.
And and again, amazing. And please check out the podcast. Again, it's okay. Like, it's all right, guys. You're gonna feel a little uncomfortable sometimes, but it's not for you. It's not for you. Yeah. So, but it's good. You'll probably become like a better boyfriend or better husband because you listen to this podcast. So go and listen to it and understand the things that women have to deal with that we've never even thought about. With that, I will see you in a galaxy far, far away. Bye, double hand wave.
Bye.